Can you forgive a mother who throws her child into a river? The people of Mombasa did. Why? Because in those waters, death was not hidden, new life was. By the banks of the Zambezi River, there was a small village named Mombasa. The people there didn't talk much, but their faces always held a strange expression, as if each of them had seen something the rest of the world never had. Every evening, as the sun began to set, a strange rustle would rise from the riverbanks, as if the water were whispering to someone, or hiding someone's scream. In this village lived Nia. She was quiet, but her eyes held a fire that never seemed to fade. People said her birth was a curse, but no one had ever heard a word from her mother's lips. Nia's childhood was lonely, void of friends, but she never complained. Every day, she would sit by the Zambezi for hours, as if waiting for something, or speaking to someone only she could see. There was an old tale about Nia, a forgotten legend that lived only in the hearts of the grandmothers. An ancient sorcerer named Olumide once said that if someone offered a sacrifice of new life to the waters of the Zambezi, they would gain a power greater than death itself. But that sacrifice was not the fruit of a tree, nor the blood of an animal. It was the most precious piece of a mother's love. When Nia came of age, her beauty drove the village boys mad. But she never spared a glance at any of them. Her heart was always tangled in the Zambezi. People whispered behind her back, saying there was something else inside her, an ancient spirit or a hidden force. One day, a traveler arrived. His name was Kato, tall, fair-skinned, and there was something in his eyes that drew people in. For the first time, Nia looked a man in the eyes. And Kato, it seemed, had been waiting for her. They met like two old souls reuniting. Love bloomed, but it was a love like fire, one that only burned. A few months later, Nia was with child. The village erupted in whispers and gasps. People said, "The cursed girl has brought forth a new life. Will the river forgive her?" But Nia remained silent. Kato had already left the village by then, as if he were just a shadow. No one knew where he had gone. One night, when the moon was full and the river roared louder than usual, Nia gave birth to a baby girl in her small hut. The child's eyes shimmered blue, as if the river itself lived within them. Nia held her in her arms, looked at her face, and smiled through tear-filled eyes. And then, she began to walk. The villagers saw that night, a body wrapped in a white cloth, and a woman walking without pause, without fear, toward the Zambezi Bridge. No one stopped her. It was as if they knew something was about to happen, but they could not be a part of it. Standing on the bridge, Nia glanced down at the water. She heard a voice from somewhere, whispering, "Offer the new life, and awaken the ancient magic." She looked at her daughter, kissed her cheeks, and then, she cast her into the river. The water embraced the child swiftly, but the river was silent. No scream, no sound. Nia looked up toward the sky, as if demanding an answer. Then she vanished. After that night, Nia was never seen again. Something changed in the village. The river grew calmer. Its waters held a new light. Then, a few years later, by the banks of the Zambezi, a small girl would sometimes appear, with blue eyes. She would play with the water, yet never get wet. People called her the daughter of Zambezi. No one knew who she was. But whenever a mother wept for her child in the night, that girl's voice could be heard whispering, "I am here." Olumide's tale was true. Nia had awakened the magic. But no one had ever imagined what the true meaning of magic was, the sacrifice of love and the spirit born from it, who now wiped away the tears of every mother. Time passed, but the people of Mombasa never forgot Nia. The Zambezi River, once just a flowing stream, had become a sacred place. People would visit in secret to pray, for mothers, for children, and sometimes for their own sins. Then one day, another traveler arrived in the village. His face looked familiar to many, but no one could quite remember why. He picked up an old tambourine, sat in the center of the village, and began to sing. His voice held a kind of magic, as if each word stirred an ancient memory. From the youngest to the oldest, everyone gathered around him. When he said his name, a gasp escaped from the villagers' lips. Cato. Cato told a story, his and Nia's. He shared how he hadn't abandoned Nia, but that the magic of Zambezi had called him away. I left to understand the truth behind the magic, he said. I wanted to feel what Nia felt, that pull to the river, night after night. And when Cato returned, he noticed something. Every other child in the village had blue eyes. At first, no one had paid attention, but now it was undeniable. Zambezi had turned Nia's sacrifice into more than just a force, it had become a new generation. Children who could understand water, who heard the rivers rustling as a language, and who dreamed of a woman they'd never seen, but always felt, a mother they never met, yet deeply knew. The elders of the village made a decision to build a temple by the riverbank. Not for a goddess, not for any deity, but for Nia, the woman who, as a mother, had offered her soul in sacrifice. After Nia, the girl once known as the daughter of Zambezi was given a true name, Amora. Amora learned to speak with people, but her deepest conversations were always with the river. Whenever drought struck, whenever the land grew dry, Amora would step into the water, touch it with her hands, and within days, rain would fall. Some began to worship her as a goddess. But Amora would say, I'm just a child, born from a mother's love, and given to the river through that love. One day, people from another village came. Their land was dry, their hearts desperate, and they needed a miracle. They asked Amora for help. She said nothing, only took a single lamp and walked into the middle of the Zambezi, placing it gently into the water. 2 days later, rain poured over their fields. Amora was no longer just a person. She was a sign. Every time a mother sang a lullaby to her child, it included her name. Hush now, my child, in Amora's river, dreams await. Born from a mother's arms, where the lamps of love remain lit. But the story did not end there. One night, when a storm swept through Mombasa and the river churned violently, Amora disappeared. The villagers searched the entire river, but she was nowhere to be found. The village fell into mourning. But on the 3rd day, a woman appeared by the Zambezi. Her eyes were like Amora's. But she was grown, her body shaped like a mother's, and her walk held a haunting calm. She said, I am not Amora. I am Nia. The villagers were stunned. But you? She interrupted gently. I only left. Into the Zambezi. Time stands still in there, but the soul keeps moving. When my daughter completed her purpose, I returned. Nia told them, the Zambezi was not just a river. It was a living soul. A mirror of every mother who had ever broken in love, but still gave everything for her child. Nia was no longer just Nia. She had become Moji Moyo, the spirit of the water, the goddess of mothers. Since then, every bridge, every river, every child in Mombasa carries the names of Nia and Amora in remembrance. A legend was born. She threw her child into the river. But she didn't give death. She gave life. It wasn't a scream. It was a prayer. Years passed. Mombasa was no longer a small village, it had become a spiritual center. Every year, thousands came, some seeking prayers, some hiding their sins, and some searching for truth. The Zambezi was no longer just a river, but a story, one in which every drop held either solace or sorrow. But the story was not yet over. One evening, as the sun bled red across the sky, a woman arrived at the edge of the village, dressed in black, with a darkness deep in her eyes. She looked toward the Zambezi and smiled, but it wasn't a smile of love. It was the smile of revenge. Her name was Zula, and she was Nia's sister. No one had known that Nia's magic had awakened not just life, but also a fire of envy burning in Zula's heart. When Nia gained power, Zula was left in loneliness. When Nia became a goddess, Zula became darkness. Zula stood before the Zambezi and chanted a dark mantra, in an ancient tongue known only to forgotten sorcerers. The water stirred, the wind shivered. For the first time, the river screamed. People ran, Nia, Amora, and the whole village came rushing. Zula cried out, "You sanctified a sin. You killed your child and called it divine. No. I will show the world your truth." Silence fell. Nia stepped forward. Her eyes held fire, but also weariness. "I did not kill my daughter, Zula. I gave her to the Zambezi, where she gave life to others. If there was love in your heart, you would have understood." Zula laughed bitterly. "Love. I was a mother too, but no one remembered me. Your story became legend, mine turned to dust." She raised her hands and unleashed her magic. The Zambezi turned black. "I, too, demand a sacrifice," she said. "But this time, the river will cry." Then Amora stepped forward. She gently took Zula's hand and said, "You only need to feel, just once, the soul of a mother who gave everything in love. That soul lives within me. Touch me, and you will know." Zula touched her hand, and in that moment, the rage, the jealousy, the bitterness, all shattered. She saw a young Amora, cradled by the Zambezi, a mother who stayed awake by the river all night, a daughter who turned every tear into a prayer. Zula collapsed. Tears streamed from her eyes. "I was wrong," she said. "You weren't a sinner. You were sacred." The river regained its glow. The water returned to its color. There was a sweetness in the air, as if an old story had finally turned into a prayer. That night, Nia held Amora in her arms and said, "It is time for me to return. The Zambezi gave me so much, now I must give it back." Everyone protested. "No, Nia, your place is here." Nia smiled softly. "No. My place is in those waters, where mothers come to bury their tears. Where every scream turns into a prayer." She stepped into the Zambezi. The water swirled around her, as if the river itself was embracing its mother. One last time, she looked at Amora and said, "You are not just my daughter, you are the soul of every mother." And then, she dissolved into the river. Amora took Zula's hand, and together, they built the first temple of the mother in Mombasa, where every woman could come and pour out her pain, and every child could become a story. From that day, a saying was born. She threw her child into the river, so that every mother's pain could become a prayer. She turned her soul into water, and the water into soul.